My mother-in-law collapsed at my doorstep, begging on her knees. Her perfectly manicured hands that once pushed me away at family photos were now clutching my scrubs, trembling. "Please save my son," she sobbed, mascara streaming down her face. I was the only kidney match. My 9-year-old daughter stood beside me, watching her grandmother beg. Emma looked up at me with those wise brown eyes and said 5 words that changed everything. "Mom, remember what she said?" Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Sarah, and at 32 years old, I've learned that some wounds never fully heal. They just teach you how to walk differently. I wasn't born into privilege or beauty pageants. Growing up as the middle child between 2 sisters who looked like they stepped out of magazines, I became invisible early. My older sister Beth modeled for local boutiques. My younger sister Amy won Homecoming Queen. I won the science fair 3 years running, but nobody puts those photos on the mantle. When I met Tom during my nursing program, I wasn't looking for love. I was pulling a double shift at the campus coffee shop, spilled an entire latte on his laptop, and instead of yelling, he laughed. "Well, I needed an excuse to upgrade anyway," he said, mopping up coffee with his sleeve. That was Tom, always finding silver linings. 6 months later, he proposed in that same coffee shop, getting down on one knee right where we'd met, promising me forever. I brought nothing but determination to our marriage. No trust fund, no family connections, just calloused hands from years of work, and a heart that knew how to love without conditions. While 8 months pregnant with Emma, I worked extra shifts in the cardiac unit. My feet so swollen I had to wear Tom's sneakers. Every dollar went into our savings jar labeled Emma's Future that sat on our kitchen counter. Some nights I'd fall asleep at that kitchen table, still in my scrubs, my head on my textbooks, trying to finish my continuing education credits. Tom's mother Margaret seemed kind at first. During our engagement, she'd call me the daughter she never had, praising how I took care of Tom. I should have noticed the backhanded compliments. "You're so practical, Sarah. Not like those silly girls who focus on appearance." Or, "Tom needs someone stable like you, someone who won't distract him with drama." But I was so grateful to finally have a mother figure, having lost my own mom to cancer when I was 15, that I absorbed every word like gospel. I became the perfect daughter-in-law, or at least I tried. Every Sunday, I cooked Margaret's late husband's recipes from the cookbook she gave me, even though she'd always mention how Jessica, Tom's ex-girlfriend, was too sophisticated for kitchen work. I drove 40 minutes each way to take Margaret to her weekly hair appointments, sitting in waiting rooms reading outdated magazines while she told the stylists about Tom's ex, who now lived in Paris. "A real model," she'd say, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not Instagram nonsense, actual Vogue shoots." When Emma was born, I thought everything would change. Margaret held her granddaughter and cried, saying she was perfect. But even then, examining Emma's tiny features, she said, "Thank God she got Tom's nose. Your nose is a bit sturdy for a girl." Tom just chuckled, missing the sting entirely. I swallowed my hurt like I'd swallowed so many others, telling myself Margaret came from a different generation. Looking back now, standing here with Margaret on her knees begging for her other son's life, I realize I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. But sometimes the universe has a strange sense of justice. Sometimes the practical, sturdy-nosed, not pretty enough daughter-in-law becomes the only one who can save the day. Our life before everything changed was beautifully ordinary, the kind of simple routine that you don't appreciate until it's gone. Every morning at 5 a.m., my phone would buzz with the soft chime I'd selected specifically not to wake Tom. I'd slip out of bed, my feet finding the warm slippers Tom bought me after I complained about our cold floors, and pad quietly to the kitchen. The coffee maker would already be set from the night before, filling our small apartment with that rich aroma that made early mornings bearable. While the coffee brewed, I'd pack Tom's lunch with the same care my mother once packed mine. A sandwich on whole wheat because he was watching his cholesterol, an apple cut into slices with peanut butter in a small container because he was still a kid at heart, and always a note tucked inside. Simple things like, "You're going to nail that presentation today," or "Emma drew this star for her daddy." Tom would text me pictures of his coworkers jealously eyeing his homemade lunches while they ate sad desk salads from the deli downstairs. By 5:45, Emma would wander into the kitchen, her stuffed elephant Mr. Peanuts dragging behind her, hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, sunshine," I'd whisper, lifting her onto the counter while I braided her hair. She'd lean against me, still warm with sleep, asking what adventures the day would bring. Together, we'd water our tiny balcony garden, Emma carefully tending to the tomato plants she'd named after Disney princesses. "Elsa needs extra water today, Mommy. She looks thirsty." Tom would emerge by 6:30, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror, kissing us both goodbye with promises to be home for dinner. Those mornings felt like choreographed dances we'd perfected, each of us moving through our roles with comfortable precision. I'd drop Emma at preschool on my way to the hospital, her little backpack bouncing as she ran to join her friends, always turning back to blow me one last kiss. My shifts at the hospital were long but fulfilling. I worked in pediatric nursing, spending my days with sick children who needed comfort as much as medicine. My colleagues would tease that I brought too many homemade cookies for the break room, but they never complained when eating them. Dr. Rodriguez would say, "Sarah, you're going to make us all fat and happy," while reaching for his third snickerdoodle. Weekends were sacred family time. Saturdays meant pancake breakfasts, where Emma would help mix the batter, inevitably getting more on herself than in the bowl. Tom would play his old guitar, teaching Emma silly songs while I cleaned up the pancake explosion. Margaret would arrive by noon, and I'd have her favorite chamomile tea ready, served in the china cups she'd given us as a wedding gift. Sunday dinners became our tradition. I'd spend the afternoon preparing Margaret's late husband's pot roast recipe, the one she'd carefully written out on an index card, though she'd always mention that Jessica probably ate at Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris. The dining table would be set with our mismatched plates that told the story of our marriage, from clearance sales to wedding gifts. Emma would carefully fold napkins into shapes she learned at preschool, proudly presenting swan napkins that looked more like crumpled tissues. After dinner, we'd sit in our living room, Emma showing Margaret her drawings from the week while Tom played soft melodies on his guitar. I'd take pictures of these moments, developing them at the pharmacy and placing them in albums labeled by year. Margaret would flip through them occasionally, commenting on how domestic our life was, as if simplicity was something to be ashamed of. Our two-bedroom apartment wasn't much, but it was ours. Emma's room was painted purple, her favorite color, with glow-in-the-dark stars Tom had carefully arranged to match real constellations. Our bedroom held our garage sale furniture that we'd refinished together, each paint drip and uneven surface a memory of laughter and amateur craftsmanship. The living room showcased Emma's artwork gallery on one wall, each masterpiece dated and displayed with the same pride others might reserve for expensive paintings. This was our normal, our perfect, ordinary life that felt like everything I'd ever wanted. The first crack in my perfect, ordinary life appeared during Emma's third birthday party, though I didn't recognize it as a warning at the time. We'd transformed our apartment into a princess wonderland with pink streamers, handmade paper crowns, and a castle cake I'd spent 2 nights decorating. Emma wore the purple princess dress I'd sewn myself, twirling for every guest who arrived, her joy infectious enough to make even the adults smile. Margaret arrived an hour late, which wasn't unusual, but she brought an unexpected +1 to the party. "This is my friend Dolores from book club," she announced, though I'd never heard her mention any Dolores before. The woman looked me up and down with an appraising eye that made me unconsciously smooth my flour-dusted apron. Margaret had also brought a gift that seemed odd, a framed photo of Tom as a child, but she'd placed it prominently on our mantel, right in front of our family photos. As the children played Pin the Crown on the Princess, Margaret pulled out her phone, showing Dolores photo after photo. Her voice carried over the children's laughter, deliberately louder than necessary. "This was Tom's girlfriend before Sarah," she said, swiping through what must have been dozens of pictures. "Jessica. She's a model in Paris now. Look at that bone structure. Some women just have it naturally, don't they?" Dolores glanced at me sympathetically while I served juice boxes, pretending not to hear. Tom was in the corner assembling Emma's new tricycle, completely oblivious. Margaret continued her presentation, showing Jessica in elegant gowns, on runways, in magazine spreads. "Tom really knew how to pick them back then," she said, emphasizing back then like it was a golden era that had sadly passed. When it came time to cut Emma's cake, everyone gathered around singing. Emma's eyes shined with pure happiness as she closed them to make a wish. That's when Margaret struck again. "Good thing Emma got Tom's genes, right?" she said to the room, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. "Those cheekbones definitely aren't from Sarah's side. Sarah's family has more sturdy features." The room went quiet except for Emma blowing out her candles. Tom's Aunt Helen coughed uncomfortably. Our neighbor Maria suddenly became very interested in her phone. Tom finally looked up from the tricycle instructions, sensing the tension but missing the cause. "What did I miss?" he asked cheerfully, and Margaret just smiled, patting his cheek like he was still her little boy. Later, while Emma opened presents, Margaret made sure to comment on each one. The art set from us was practical, very Sarah. The designer dress from Margaret was what Tom would have picked if he'd gone shopping. When Emma opened a book about princesses from our neighbor, Margaret said, "Oh, fairy tales. Well, not everyone can live one, can they, Sarah? Some of us live in the real world with real-world limitations." I was refilling the snack bowls in the kitchen when I overheard Margaret talking to Tom's cousin Linda by the balcony. "Jessica reached out to me last week," she said, loud enough for me to hear through the pass-through window. "She asked about Tom. Still single, can you believe it? A woman like that. She said she made a mistake leaving for Paris. Some opportunities you just can't get back. Though Tom certainly tried to move on." My hands shook as I arranged the cookies I'd baked that morning, each one decorated with Emma's favorite princess characters, hours of careful work that suddenly felt pathetic. Tom's cousin mumbled something non-committal and escaped back to the living room. Margaret stayed by the balcony, scrolling through her phone, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. The party continued around me, Emma's laughter bright and innocent, unaware that her grandmother had just planted the first seeds of poison. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach, the kind of instinctive warning that something was very wrong. But I pushed it down, telling myself I was being paranoid, that Margaret was just having a nostalgic day. After all, what kind of grandmother would deliberately try to hurt her son's family? I became an expert at making excuses for Margaret's behavior, constructing elaborate explanations in my mind that protected me from the truth I wasn't ready to face. Maybe she was going through menopause, I told myself, though she was well past that age. Maybe she was depressed about the anniversary of her husband's death approaching. Maybe she was developing early dementia. Anything but the possibility that she was deliberately, methodically cruel. The week after Emma's birthday party, I threw myself into being an even better daughter-in-law. I researched Margaret's father's ancestry, creating a family tree for Emma to know her heritage. I baked Margaret's favorite lemon squares from scratch, driving them to her house still warm from the oven. When she bit into one and said, "Jessica once brought me macarons from La Durée in Paris. Have you ever had authentic French pastries, Sarah?" I just smiled and asked if she wanted me to adjust the sugar next time. Tom noticed my extra efforts but misread them entirely. "You're so good to her," he said one evening, kissing my forehead while I assembled a photo album of Margaret's family memories I'd spent hours organizing. "She's lucky to have you." When I tentatively mentioned that Margaret seemed to bring up Jessica a lot lately, Tom just shrugged. "Mom lives in the past sometimes. Jessica was around during Dad's final years, so maybe she associates those memories together. Don't read too much into it." I started documenting Margaret's comments in my head, then immediately dismissing them. When she told her hairdresser, while I sat right there, that Tom's ex was a natural blonde, not like these box dyes everyone uses now, while pointedly looking at my brown hair, I convinced myself she was talking about someone else. When she suggested Tom take Emma to the park alone because fathers and daughters need special time and Sarah probably needs to catch up on housework, I told myself she was trying to be helpful. The self-gaslighting became an art form. Margaret would invite us to dinner, then spend the entire meal discussing articles about successful models, international travel, and how some women just have that special something that opens doors. I'd sit there cutting Emma's food into small pieces, nodding politely, internally explaining away every barb. She's worldly, she's cultured, she's trying to expose us to new topics. She doesn't mean anything by it. My sister Beth called me after running into Margaret at the grocery store. "Sarah, why did Tom's mom ask me if you'd ever been tested for depression? She said you seem dimmer lately and that it runs in families." I laughed it off, explaining that Margaret was probably concerned because I'd been working extra shifts. But that night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, wondering if I did look dimmer, whatever that meant. The mental gymnastics exhausted me. When Margaret bought Emma a book about beauty queens and told her, "This is what Daddy used to like," I reasoned that she was just encouraging Emma to dream big. When she accidentally forgot to invite me to her ladies' lunch, but made sure Tom knew about it so he could bring Emma, I decided she must have thought Tom already told me. When she mentioned that Jessica's modeling agency was opening a New York branch and, "Wouldn't it be funny if she moved back?" I determined she was just making conversation. Tom remained blissfully unaware, or perhaps willfully blind. When Margaret gave him a cologne for his birthday, mentioning it was the one Jessica had bought him years ago, he just thanked her and wore it to work. When I finally broke down one night, tears streaming as I told him his mother kept comparing me to Jessica, he held me but said, "Honey, you're being too sensitive. Mom doesn't mean anything by it. She loves you. She tells everyone what a good wife and mother you are." But what kind of good wife and mother was I if I couldn't even earn my mother-in-law's basic respect? The denial was easier than the alternative. Admitting that the woman I'd tried so hard to love actually despised me, and my husband didn't care enough to notice. The Thursday afternoon that changed everything started with a call from Emma's preschool. She'd developed a fever during nap time, nothing serious, but she needed to be picked up. I was in the middle of my shift at the hospital, monitoring a young patient who'd just come out of surgery. Margaret was on the emergency contact list and lived 5 minutes from the preschool, while I was 30 minutes away in traffic. I called her, and she agreed to get Emma, saying she'd been wanting some grandmother-granddaughter time anyway. I finished my shift as quickly as possible, my mind on Emma the entire time. The fever wasn't high, but she always wanted her mommy when she felt sick. I stopped at the pharmacy for children's Tylenol and her favorite apple juice, the one in the bottle shaped like a bear that cost twice as much, but always made her smile. Traffic crawled, each red light feeling like an eternity. When I finally arrived at Margaret's house, I used my spare key to enter quietly, not wanting to wake Emma if she was napping. Margaret's voice carried from the kitchen, on the phone with someone, her tone animated and conspiratorial. I froze in the hallway, something in her voice making me pause instead of announcing myself. "Jessica's still single, you know," Margaret was saying, her voice dripping with significance. "And she asked about Tom last week when we had lunch." My stomach dropped. They'd had lunch? She showed me her latest modeling shots. 30 years old and still looks like she's 20. Some women just have those genes. Not like Sarah, who's already getting crow's feet and she's younger than Jessica. I stood paralyzed, my hand gripping Emma's juice bottle so hard the plastic crackled. Margaret continued, unaware of my presence. "I've been working on Tom slowly. Planting seeds, you know how men are. They don't realize they're unhappy until you point it out. I mentioned how tired Sarah always looks, how she's let herself go since Emma was born. He's starting to notice things." Then I heard it. Emma crying. Not the feverish whimper I expected, but deep, heartbroken sobs coming from the living room. I rushed past the kitchen doorway, Margaret's startled face a blur, finding Emma standing in front of Margaret's full-length mirror, tears streaming down her flushed face, her little hands pressed against the glass. "Mommy!" she wailed when she saw me, running into my arms. Grandma says you're not pretty like Daddy's special friend. She showed me pictures on her phone of a pretty lady and said that's who Daddy loved before you. And she's much prettier. And that's why Daddy looks sad sometimes, because he misses the pretty lady." The room spun. I held Emma against me, feeling her fevered little body shaking with sobs. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face switching from caught to defensive in an instant. "Oh, Sarah, you're here early." Emma misunderstood. I was just showing her some old photos. "Did you tell my 3-year-old daughter that I'm not pretty?" My voice came out steady, deadly quiet, nothing like the scream building in my chest. Margaret straightened her shoulders. "I'm just being honest with the child. Children should understand reality. Jessica was a model. You're practical. There's nothing wrong with being practical, Sarah. Tom settled for practical after Jessica chose career over marriage. Someone had to tell Emma the truth before she gets unrealistic expectations about beauty." Emma's sobs intensified. "Why aren't you pretty like the lady in the pictures, Mommy? Why did Daddy pick you if you're not pretty? Will Daddy leave us for someone pretty?" Each word was a knife. My baby, my innocent 3-year-old baby, was questioning my worth, her security, our family's foundation, because her grandmother had deliberately poisoned her mind. The evidence was undeniable now. No more excuses, no more denial. Margaret had looked at my precious daughter and chosen to hurt her just to hurt me. "We're leaving," I said, gathering Emma's things with shaking hands. Margaret followed us to the door. "You're overreacting as usual. This is why Tom—" I shut the door on her words, on her poison, carrying my sobbing daughter to the car, her repeated questions about whether Daddy would leave us for someone prettier echoing in my ears all the way home. That evening remains burned into my memory with the clarity that only comes from life-shattering moments. Emma cried for 3 straight hours, the kind of crying that makes their whole body shake, asking questions no 3-year-old should ever have to ask. Is Daddy going to get a new family with the pretty lady? If I'm very good, will you become pretty like her? Did I make you not pretty, Mommy? Each question carved deeper wounds than the last. I held her in her tiny purple bedroom, rocking in the chair where I'd nursed her as a baby, singing soft songs while my heart shattered into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be reassembled. She'd finally exhausted herself into hiccuping sobs when I heard Tom's key in the door. I'd texted him simply, "Come straight home. Emergency with Emma." He rushed into Emma's room, still in his work suit, face etched with concern. "What happened? Is she sick? Should we go to the hospital?" "Your mother happened," I said, my voice raw from holding back my own tears. She told Emma that I'm not pretty like Jessica, that you settled for me, that you look sad because you miss someone prettier. I expected outrage. I expected him to immediately pull out his phone to call Margaret, to defend his wife and child, to be the protector every husband should be. Instead, Tom sighed and rubbed his face. Sarah, come on. Mom didn't mean it that way. You know how she is. Emma probably misunderstood. The last thread holding me together snapped. Misunderstood? Tom, your mother literally told our 3-year-old that you settled for me because Jessica chose Paris over you. Emma asked if you're going to leave us for someone prettier. She's been crying for 3 hours. Tom looked at Emma, finally asleep but still hiccuping in her dreams. Tear tracks dried on her flushed cheeks. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe recognition, but then he shook his head. Mom's from a different generation. She doesn't realize how her words sound. She loves Emma. She loves you too. In her own way. Her own way. I stood up carefully, laying Emma in her bed, pulling her butterfly blanket up to her chin. In the hallway, I turned on Tom with all the fury I'd been suppressing. Your mother has been systematically comparing me to your ex-girlfriend since Emma's birthday. She's been having lunch with Jessica. Did you know that? Did you know Jessica asked about you? Tom's face flushed. Mom mentioned Jessica was back in town temporarily for a shoot. So what? That's ancient history. Is it? Because you don't seem upset that your mother is traumatizing our daughter with this ancient history. You're wearing the cologne Jessica bought you. You've been letting your mother poison our child's mind, and you're standing here making excuses. You're blowing this out of proportion, Tom said, the defensive edge in his voice telling me everything I needed to know. Mom said you've been sensitive lately. Maybe you should talk to someone. The betrayal was complete. Not only was Margaret undermining me, but she'd been laying groundwork with Tom, making him question my mental state so my concerns would seem like paranoia. Your mother told you I've been sensitive? What else has she told you? Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. Just that you seem tired, overwhelmed, that maybe you're taking on too much with the extra shifts. She's concerned about you. Concerned? I laughed, but it came out broken. She's been telling Emma I'm not pretty enough for you, and you think she's concerned about me? Sarah, please, let's not fight. Emma needs us to be united. Emma needs a father who protects her from people who hurt her, even if that person is your mother. I walked past him to our bedroom, locking myself in our bathroom where I finally let my own tears fall, muffling my sobs with a towel so Emma wouldn't wake up. Through the door, I heard Tom on the phone with Margaret. Mom, Sarah's really upset. No, I know you didn't mean. Yes, I understand. Sure, we can still come to Sunday dinner. I'll talk to her. The betrayal wasn't just Margaret's cruelty. It was Tom's complicity, his willingness to sacrifice his wife and daughter's emotional well-being on the altar of keeping his mother happy. That night, I knew our marriage would never be the same. The full scope of Margaret's plan revealed itself piece by piece over the following weeks, like a toxic puzzle I wished I'd never had to solve. It started when Tom left his phone on the counter while showering, and a text notification lit up the screen. It was from Margaret, with a photo attachment. Against my better judgment, knowing it was wrong but desperate for answers, I looked. The photo was of Jessica at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant, radiant in a black dress, raising a glass of wine toward the camera. Margaret's message read, "She looked amazing at lunch today. She asked if you're happy. I told her you put on a brave face. The Riverside Gallery opening is next Friday. She'll be there. You should drop by after work." My hands trembled as I scrolled up through their conversation. Weeks of messages, carefully orchestrated encounters Margaret had been engineering. Ran into Jessica at Whole Foods today. What a coincidence. Jessica's yoga studio is near your office. Small world. Each message accompanied by photos of Jessica looking flawless, often with comments about how successful she'd become, how she'd matured, how she'd realized what really mattered in life. But the conspiracy went deeper than romantic manipulation. I found an email Tom had forwarded to himself from his mother, probably to review later. It was about his father's estate, something I'd never been allowed to discuss. The trust was structured unusually. If Tom remained married for 10 continuous years, the entire inheritance would pass to Emma and any future children, skipping Margaret entirely. We were in year 3. If Tom divorced before the 10-year mark, Margaret would retain control as trustee until Emma turned 25. The amount made my head spin. $2 million. Margaret currently controlled $2 million that should have been Emma's, and she'd lose it all in 7 more years if Tom and I stayed married. Suddenly, the timeline of her escalating behavior made sense. She wasn't just trying to break up our marriage, she was protecting her financial control. I dug deeper, finding browser history Tom hadn't cleared. He'd been looking at Jessica's social media profiles late at night. One search particularly stung: Jessica Laurent model Paris move back to New York. He'd Googled her 14 times in the past month. When I checked our joint credit card statement online, I found a charge at Riverside Gallery from 2 weeks ago, during a time he'd said he was working late. The gallery where Jessica had apparently been showing her photography. My investigation continued while Tom traveled for business. In our shared computer, I found a folder labeled tax documents that contained more than just W-2s. There were emails Tom had saved between Margaret and her lawyer about the trust, discussing options if Thomas's current marriage situation changes. One particularly damning line from Margaret read, "The child would be provided for, of course, but under my careful management until she's old enough to handle such wealth responsibly." The most devastating discovery came from Emma's preschool. Her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, pulled me aside at pickup. "I wanted to check if everything is okay at home. Emma's been playing some concerning games during free time. She keeps arranging the doll families where the daddy doll leaves with a prettier mommy doll, and the original mommy doll has to live alone." That evening, I confronted reality while making dinner. Margaret wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law. She was actively sabotaging our marriage for money, using our daughter as collateral damage, and Tom was either too weak or too tempted to stop her. The woman who claimed to love Emma was willing to destroy her sense of security for $2 million and the satisfaction of replacing me with someone she deemed worthy. I stood at our stove, stirring pasta sauce with one hand while helping Emma with her coloring at the kitchen table with the other. She was drawing our family again, but now there was a shadowy figure standing next to Daddy, and Mommy was drawn smaller, pushed to the edge of the paper. My 3-year-old was illustrating the destruction of our family in crayon, and I finally understood that this wasn't about beauty or worthiness or even Jessica. It was about greed, control, and a grandmother willing to sacrifice her granddaughter's happiness for money and manipulated pride. That night, Tom returned from his business trip and Emma was asleep, I reached my breaking point. I sat on our bathroom floor at 2 a.m., my back against the cold tub, scrolling through our wedding photos on my phone. There we were, Tom placing the ring on my finger, his eyes full of promises. There was Margaret, dabbing at fake tears, wearing a white dress that I'd been too naive to recognize as an insult. There was me, glowing with happiness, believing I'd finally found my family. The sobs came in waves, each one pulling me deeper into an ocean of grief I'd been holding back for months. I pressed a towel against my mouth to muffle the sound, but my body shook with the force of suppressed screams. Every sacrifice I'd made played through my mind like a cruel slideshow. The night shifts I'd worked while 7 months pregnant, my feet so swollen I couldn't wear shoes, saving money for Emma's college fund. The scholarship to pursue my nurse practitioner degree that I'd declined because Tom said we needed to focus on our family first. I remembered the day I'd used my entire savings, money I'd scraped together since I was 16, to pay for Margaret's hip surgery when her insurance wouldn't cover the specialist she wanted. She'd never thanked me. Instead, she'd told everyone at her book club that Tom had paid for it, that he was such a devoted son. I'd stood there serving them tea, invisible as always, while they praised Tom for my sacrifice. The photos kept scrolling. Emma's first Christmas, when I'd spent 3 nights hand-sewing stockings with everyone's names because Margaret mentioned her family tradition. She looked at mine and said, "Oh, you used the wrong shade of red. Ours were always crimson, not scarlet." Tom's birthday last year, when I'd organized a surprise party with all his college friends, staying up until 4 a.m. making his favorite German chocolate cake from scratch. Margaret had brought a store-bought cake anyway, claiming she didn't trust my baking for such an important occasion. My phone slipped from my numb fingers as a memory hit me with physical force. Last Mother's Day, Emma had made me a card at preschool that said, "My mommy is the prettiest." Margaret had seen it on our refrigerator and laughed. "Children have such imagination," she'd said, right in front of me. I'd smiled and made her tea, like I always did. The bathroom walls felt like they were closing in as I remembered every time I'd made myself smaller to fit into their world. Skipping my sister's birthday dinner because Margaret needed someone to drive her to a non-urgent doctor's appointment. Missing my father's retirement party because Tom thought it would be good for Emma to spend the weekend at Margaret's house. Canceling lunch with my college roommate, my only close friend, so many times that she'd stopped calling. I crawled to the toilet and vomited, my body finally rejecting all the poison I'd swallowed with a smile. Afterward, I lay on the cool tile floor, staring at the ceiling, feeling completely hollowed out. Who was I anymore? When had I become this ghost of a person, existing only to serve people who saw me as an inconvenience at best, a temporary placeholder at worst? My reflection in the bathroom mirror was a stranger, dark circles under my eyes from years of early mornings and late nights. Hair that I kept in a permanent ponytail because who had time for styling? The sparkle in my eyes from our wedding photos had been replaced by a dull exhaustion. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe I wasn't pretty. Maybe I never had been. Maybe I'd fooled Tom somehow, and now the truth was catching up. The darkest thought crept in. Maybe Emma would be better off with a prettier mother, someone who could teach her about beauty and confidence instead of whatever this was. The thought terrified me enough to make me sit up, gasping. That wasn't true. It couldn't be true. But at 3 a.m., alone on a bathroom floor, with my marriage crumbling and my daughter drawing pictures of our family falling apart, I couldn't remember why I was worth fighting for. The turning point came the next morning in the most unexpected way. I was exhausted, having barely slept after my bathroom floor breakdown, mechanically going through our morning routine. Emma sat at the kitchen table, drawing while eating her cereal, when she suddenly looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that could see straight through to my soul. "Mommy," she said, putting down her purple crayon. "Isabella's grandma told her she's beautiful every day. Why does our grandma tell me you're not beautiful?" I froze, holding the coffee pot mid-pour, searching for words that wouldn't come. Emma continued, her little voice matter of fact. "I told Mrs. Peterson at school that my mommy isn't pretty, and she looked really sad. She said that's not true. But Grandma wouldn't lie, would she?" Something inside me, something that had been dormant for too long, suddenly roared to life. My daughter was questioning fundamental truths about love, beauty, and worth because of Margaret's poison. She was spreading this toxicity at school, normalizing the idea that her mother was somehow less than. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the woman Emma would become, the relationships she'd accept, the way she'd value herself. I set down the coffee pot and knelt beside Emma's chair, taking her small hands in mine. Emma, honey, Grandma is wrong. Sometimes adults are wrong, even grandmas. Beauty isn't just about how someone looks in pictures. Real beauty is how we treat people, how we love, how we make others feel safe and happy. Like how you make me feel, Emma asked, tilting her head. Do I make you feel loved? I asked. More than anything, she said, throwing her arms around my neck. Then I'm beautiful in the way that matters most, I said, holding her tight, feeling something shift fundamentally inside me. After dropping Emma at preschool instead of heading to work, I called in sick for the first time in 2 years. I drove to my sister Beth's house, sitting in her sunny kitchen while her twins napped, and told her everything. Every insult, every manipulation, every discovery about the trust fund and Jessica. Beth's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, fierce protectiveness. Sarah, she said, gripping my hands across her kitchen table, you are one of the strongest, kindest, most beautiful people I know. You've just been letting someone else hold the mirror for too long. Take it back. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. You start by stopping, Beth said firmly. Stop trying to earn Margaret's approval. Stop cooking her dinners. Stop being her chauffeur. Stop letting her near Emma unsupervised. Stop pretending this is normal. That afternoon, I made decisions that felt like climbing out of quicksand. I changed the emergency pickup list at Emma's school, removing Margaret's name. I opened my own savings account at a different bank, small, but mine. I called the community college and asked about their nurse practitioner program, the one I'd walked away from. They still had my application on file. The advisor said I could start in the fall semester. I found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and booked an appointment for the following week. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my college roommate, Marie. She answered on the second ring, and when she heard my voice, she said, Sarah, I've been wondering if you were okay. We talked for an hour, and she didn't sound surprised when I told her about Margaret. I met her at your wedding, Marie said. She spent the entire reception telling people that Tom could have done better. I never said anything because you seemed so happy. That evening, when Tom came home, I had Emma's drawings spread across the dining table. Every picture from the last month where she'd made herself smaller pushed me to the edges, added shadow figures near Tom. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been in years. And this time, you're going to listen. The woman who'd been crying on the bathroom floor 12 hours ago was gone. In her place stood a mother who refused to let her daughter grow up believing that love meant accepting cruelty, that beauty was only skin deep, and that her worth was determined by someone else's standards. I wasn't just fighting back. I was taking back the narrative of our lives. My plan wasn't about destroying Margaret. It was about protecting Emma and reclaiming our dignity. I'd learned from watching my mother-in-law that the most effective strategies were subtle, systematic, and left no fingerprints. But unlike Margaret, my goal was defense, not destruction. First, I started documenting everything with the precision of the nurse I was. I bought a small recorder, legally allowed in our state for personal conversations, and kept it in my pocket during every interaction with Margaret. I photographed Emma's drawings, dating each one, creating a heartbreaking timeline of her declining self-worth. I backed up Tom's text messages with his mother to a cloud account he didn't know about, preserving evidence of Margaret's manipulation. I also began what I privately called Operation Sunshine. Every morning, I spent 5 minutes writing affirmations with Emma, posting them on her mirror with colorful sticky notes. Emma is kind. Emma is smart. Emma is loved. Emma is beautiful inside and out. We'd read them together while I braided her hair, and slowly I watched her shoulders straighten a little more each day. The next phase involved strategic withdrawal, When Margaret called asking for rides to appointments, I was suddenly swamped at work. When she expected Sunday dinners, we had previous commitments with my family. Not lies, I'd started scheduling regular visits with my father and sisters, rebuilding the relationships I'd neglected. Margaret left increasingly frustrated voicemails that I saved, each one more revealing than the last. This is what happens when Tom marries beneath his station. She spat in one message, apparently forgetting recordings existed. I enrolled in evening classes for my nurse practitioner degree, using the hours I'd previously spent serving Margaret to invest in my future. When Tom questioned the expense, I showed him my calculations. My increased salary would more than cover Emma's college fund. He couldn't argue with math, though he muttered about timing. Margaret, hearing about my classes through Tom, said it was adorable that I was trying to improve myself at my age, as if 32 was ancient. The masterstroke came through Beth's husband, who worked in financial planning. He helped me understand the trust structure better and discovered something Margaret hadn't counted on. The trust had a morality clause. If the trustee was found to be acting against the beneficiary's best interests, they could be removed. Emotional abuse of the beneficiary counted. I started building a case file with the precision of a prosecutor. Meanwhile, I contacted Jessica Laurent. It took courage I didn't know I possessed to message Tom's ex-girlfriend on social media. But her response surprised me. She agreed to a video call immediately, and the woman on my screen looked tired despite her perfect makeup. "Margaret's been contacting me for months," Jessica admitted, her French accent slight but noticeable. "She keeps trying to orchestrate meetings with Tom. Honestly, it's creepy. I'm engaged to someone here in Paris. I have no interest in Tom. I never even liked Margaret when we dated. She was always criticizing me too, just differently." "Would you be willing to write a statement about Margaret's behavior?" I asked. "I'll do better," Jessica said. "I'll forward you every email and text she's sent. She's been promising me money from some trust fund if I help break up your marriage." I thought she was joking at first, but she sent me Tom's schedule, your family routines, even suggested ways to accidentally encounter him. It's disturbing. The evidence was damning. Margaret had offered Jessica $50,000 to seduce Tom, paid from the trust she controlled. She'd called me a temporary inconvenience and said Emma would be better off with a more suitable stepmother. The woman who claimed to love her granddaughter was willing to traumatize her for money and control. I organized everything meticulously: recordings, emails, drawings, statements from Emma's teacher about concerning behavior changes, even testimony from Tom's Aunt Helen, who'd witnessed Margaret's birthday party cruelty. I wasn't planning to use it yet. This was insurance. But if Margaret escalated, if she tried to damage Emma further, I had enough evidence to remove her from the trust and potentially seek a restraining order. The plan wasn't revenge. It was a shield. But Margaret didn't know that. All she knew was that I'd stopped being her servant, and it was driving her crazy. 6 years passed like seasons of slow healing. Emma grew from a confused 3-year-old into a confident 9-year-old who knew her worth came from within. I'd completed my nurse practitioner degree, nearly doubling my salary and finding profound satisfaction in my expanded role at the Children's Hospital. Tom and I had survived through intensive marriage counseling, where he finally understood the depth of his mother's toxicity and chose his family over her approval. Margaret, cut off from unlimited access to us, had spiraled into bitter isolation, her calls becoming less frequent, her influence evaporating like morning dew. Then Kevin got sick. Tom's younger brother, the golden child who'd lived abroad for 8 years, returned home with kidney failure that seemed to appear from nowhere. The family rallied immediately, everyone getting tested as potential donors. I watched from the periphery, maintaining my careful distance from Margaret while supporting Tom through his brother's crisis. The test results came back one by one. Tom wasn't a match. Neither were the cousins, aunts, or uncles. Margaret's results showed she couldn't donate due to her age and blood pressure medications. I wasn't planning to test. Why would I help the family that had treated me as less than human? But Kevin had always been kind, sending Emma birthday cards from Tokyo, defending me once at Christmas when Margaret made another Jessica comparison. He wasn't responsible for his mother's cruelty, so I got tested, telling no one except Beth. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. "Mrs. Henderson, you're a perfect match. It's actually quite remarkable. The compatibility is as ideal as we could hope for." I sat in my office, staring at the test results, my mind spinning. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. The invisible daughter-in-law, the one not pretty enough, not good enough, not worthy enough, was the only one who could save Margaret's beloved son. That evening, as I helped Emma with homework, my phone rang incessantly. Tom answered it on the fifth call, his face going pale. "It's Mom. She's at the door. She says it's about Kevin." Margaret stood on our porch, but this wasn't the imperious woman who'd tormented me for years. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears. The moment she saw me, she literally fell to her knees on our doorstep, her designer dress crumpling on the concrete. "Please, Sarah," she sobbed, reaching for my hands. "You're the only match. I know what I've done. I know how I've treated you. But please, he's my baby. Kevin is dying. His kidneys are failing faster than they expected. Without a transplant in the next month, he won't make it." Emma appeared beside me, her math homework still in her hand, watching her grandmother kneel on our porch with wise, assessing eyes. The same grandmother who'd told her that her mommy wasn't pretty enough, who'd tried to break our family apart for money, who'd made a 3-year-old question her mother's worth. "The doctors say you're a perfect match," Margaret continued, her voice breaking. "I'll do anything. I'll sign over the entire trust fund today. I'll move away. I'll apologize publicly. I'll take out a full-page ad in the newspaper admitting what I've done. Please, Sarah, I'm begging you, mother to mother, please save my son." The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Chen across the street pretended to water her plants while watching. Tom stood frozen behind me, his face a mixture of shock and dawning realization at his mother's desperation. But it was Emma who moved first, stepping closer to me, her small hand slipping into mine. "Mom," Emma said, her voice carrying the weight of all 9 of her years. "Your choice." Margaret's sob echoed across our quiet street. Here was the woman who'd spent years telling everyone I wasn't good enough, literally on her knees, her life in the hands of the woman she'd deemed unworthy. The irony was perfect, terrible, and complete. I looked down at Margaret, still on her knees, her expensive mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks. Then I turned to Emma, my brilliant, resilient daughter who had survived this woman's poison and emerged stronger. Her eyes held no malice, just a quiet understanding that some moments define who we choose to be. "Pretty people should donate first," I said, my voice carrying across the silent street. "Maybe you should ask Jessica? I heard she's quite beautiful. Magazine covers and everything." Margaret's face went white as parchment. "Sarah, please, this isn't about—" "Isn't it?" I interrupted. "For 6 years, you told my daughter I wasn't pretty enough for your son. You tried to orchestrate meetings between Tom and his ex-girlfriend. You offered Jessica $50,000 from Emma's trust fund to seduce my husband. So why don't you call her? I'm sure someone that beautiful would be happy to help." Tom gasped behind me. "Mom, you offered Jessica money? From Emma's trust?" Margaret's mask finally cracked completely. "I was trying to protect the family. You could have done so much better. The trust needed proper management, and with the right woman—" "Stop," I said quietly, then louder, for the neighbors who were no longer pretending not to watch. Everyone should know exactly who you are, Margaret Henderson. You emotionally abused a 3-year-old child because you wanted to control $2 million. You told my baby girl that her mommy wasn't pretty enough while trying to steal her inheritance. Mrs. Chen dropped her watering can. Tom's Aunt Helen, who'd apparently just arrived, stood by her car with her mouth open. Margaret looked around wildly at the gathering audience, her carefully constructed image crumbling. But here's what you never understood, I continued, kneeling down to Margaret's level, meeting her eyes directly. Beauty isn't about magazine covers or perfect cheekbones. It's about what we choose to do when no one's watching. It's about the nurse who holds a dying child's hand at 3 a.m. It's about the mother who reads the same story 5 times because it makes her daughter smile. It's about the daughter-in-law who still saved money for her mother-in-law's hip surgery, even while being told she wasn't good enough. I stood back up, pulling Emma close. I scheduled the surgery for next Tuesday. Kevin will receive my kidney. The twist hit everyone at once. Margaret's sob turned into a wail of confusion. You're going to save him? I already told the hospital 3 days ago, I revealed. I was never going to let Kevin die for your sins. Unlike you, I don't punish innocent people for family disputes. I've been preparing for the surgery, getting my affairs in order at work, arranging care for Emma. Tom stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. Sarah, I don't understand. After everything she did? Your mother taught me something valuable, I said, addressing Tom but loud enough for everyone to hear. She showed me that cruelty is a choice. Every day she chose to be cruel. Today, I choose to be kind. Not for her. She doesn't deserve it. But for Kevin, who sent Emma birthday cards from Tokyo. For Emma, who's watching me right now and learning what strength really looks like. And for myself, because I refuse to become the bitter person Margaret tried to create. Emma looked up at her grandmother, still kneeling on our porch. Grandma, my mommy is the prettiest person in the whole world. Not because of her face, but because of her heart. She's saving Uncle Kevin even though you were mean to her. That's what real pretty looks like. Margaret broke down completely, her body shaking with sobs that were, for perhaps the first time, genuine. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything for money, for control, for my stupid pride. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. But Kevin doesn't deserve to die for your choices. The surgery is Tuesday at 7 a.m. Tom will bring you to the hospital. After Kevin recovers, you'll sign over full control of the trust to an independent executor for Emma's benefit. You'll attend therapy. And you'll never again tell any child, anywhere, that their mother isn't pretty enough. The street bore witness to Margaret's complete humiliation, but more importantly, to the moment when the woman she'd deemed unworthy proved to be worth more than she could ever understand. The surgery was successful. I woke up feeling lighter in more ways than one, with Tom holding my hand and Emma's drawing of a superhero nurse taped to the wall where I could see it. My mommy the hero, she'd written in careful cursive. Kevin was 3 rooms down, his body accepting my kidney as if it had always belonged there. The doctors called it one of the smoothest transplants they'd ever seen. Margaret came to my room on the 3rd day, looking like she'd aged a decade in a week. Gone was the perfectly coiffed woman with cutting remarks. In her place stood someone humbled, carrying a small box and a folder of legal documents. The trust, she said quietly, placing the folder on my bedside table. I've signed it all over to Emma's financial advisor, the one your brother-in-law recommended. I have no access anymore. It's all hers, as it should have been. She opened the small box with trembling hands, revealing a simple silver locket. This was my mother's. She died when I was 15, just like yours did. I became hard after that, always fighting to prove I was good enough, that I belonged. When Tom brought you home, So full of love and kindness despite losing your mother too. I saw my younger self. The self I'd killed to survive. I resented you for keeping that softness alive. Emma, who'd been coloring quietly in the corner, looked up. That's sad, Grandma. Yes, Margaret agreed, tears falling freely. It's the saddest thing in the world to let grief turn you cruel. I spent so many years building walls that I forgot how to love properly. I turned my son's inheritance into a weapon. I tried to destroy the best thing that ever happened to him because I couldn't bear to see someone succeed at being soft in a hard world. The recovery weeks that followed were transformative. Margaret started therapy, real therapy, not the performative kind she'd claimed to attend before. She sent me letters, not asking for forgiveness but sharing what she was learning about herself. Tom and I returned to counseling too, this time with a foundation of truth to build on. He'd finally seen, in full color, what his mother had been doing to us, to me, to Emma. Kevin recovered beautifully, my kidney giving him a second chance at life. He sent me flowers every week for a month, each card saying simply, "Thank you for being who Mom couldn't be." He established a scholarship at Emma's school for children who showed kindness in the face of adversity, naming it after me, despite my protests. 6 months later, at Emma's school play, Margaret sat 3 rows behind us, respecting the boundaries we'd established. When Emma delivered her lines as the brave princess who saved her kingdom with wisdom rather than beauty, I heard Margaret whisper to the stranger next to her, "That's my granddaughter. She gets her courage from her mother, the most beautiful woman I've never deserved to know." Tom had changed too. He started defending me publicly, correcting anyone who dared make comparisons or suggestions about upgrading. When his coworker mentioned his wife was no model but she could cook, Tom responded, "My wife saved my brother's life after my mother tortured her for years. She's teaching our daughter that kindness is the ultimate beauty. What's your wife teaching your kids?" The coworker never brought it up again. Jessica sent a wedding invitation from Paris, with a handwritten note. "Thank you for your grace in dealing with Margaret's harassment. You're the woman Tom deserves. I'm sorry I let her use my image to hurt you." We didn't attend, but I sent a nice gift and a photo of our happy family, Emma standing tall and proud between us. The trust fund grew under proper management, ensuring Emma's education and future were secure. But more importantly, Emma grew too, surrounded by love and the knowledge that true beauty comes from choices, not cheekbones. She started a kindness club at school, teaching other children what her mother had taught her. That pretty is as pretty does. Margaret never again mentioned Jessica, beauty, or anything about appearances. In fact, the last time I heard her on the phone with her book club, she said, "Physical beauty fades. I should know. I used to be beautiful. But Sarah, my daughter-in-law, she has the kind of beauty that saves lives, literally. That's the only beauty worth talking about." 5 years have passed since that day on my porch, when Margaret fell to her knees. Emma is now 14, a confident young woman who speaks up against bullying at her school and volunteers at the children's hospital where I work. She tells the sick children stories about how real princesses aren't the prettiest ones in the room. They're the bravest, the kindest, the ones who choose love over bitterness, even when they have every reason to be angry. Last week, Emma won an essay contest about heroes. She wrote about me, but not about the kidney donation. She wrote about the 3-year-old girl who cried for hours, thinking she wasn't pretty enough, and the mother who spent the next 11 years proving that beauty isn't measured in mirrors, but in moments of grace. The judges said they cried reading it. Margaret was in the audience when Emma read it aloud at the ceremony, and I watched. My former tormentor mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," across the auditorium. The truth is, I could have let Kevin die. I had every legal and moral right to refuse. Margaret had spent years systematically destroying my self-worth, poisoning my daughter's mind, trying to end my marriage for money. The world would have understood if I'd looked at her that day and said no. Some might have even applauded it as justice. But here's what I've learned about revenge. It's a poison you drink, hoping others will suffer. When you have the power to destroy someone who hurt you, that's exactly when your true character reveals itself. Not in the moments when kindness is easy, but in the moments when cruelty would be justified, even expected. That's when you decide who you really are. I think about the $2 million in that trust fund sometimes. Margaret was willing to destroy a family for that money, to traumatize a child, to break a marriage. She spent years calling me not pretty enough, while she was the one with the ugly heart, counting coins while her granddaughter counted the ways she wasn't good enough. But that money now sits in Emma's college fund, growing quietly, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply outlasting those who try to break you. Tom and I renewed our vows last summer. This time, Margaret wasn't wearing white. She wore soft blue and sat quietly in the back, grateful to be included. When it came time for speeches, she stood and said, "I once told people that Tom settled for Sarah. The truth is, Sarah settled for all of us. She gave us more grace than we deserved, more chances than we'd earned, and more beauty than we could recognize. Emma, if you grow up to be half the woman your mother is, you'll be twice the woman I ever was." Some nights I still find myself in the bathroom, looking at my reflection. The crow's feet Margaret once mocked are deeper now, laugh lines from years of bedtime stories and inside jokes with Emma. My hands are scarred from years of nursing, marked by service to others. I'm 37 now, further from conventional beauty than ever. But Emma tells me I'm beautiful every morning, and unlike when she was 3, she understands what that word really means. Beautiful is the choice to save someone who tried to destroy you. Beautiful is showing your daughter that strength isn't about revenge but about rising above. Beautiful is teaching the next generation that their worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. Margaret was wrong about me, but more importantly, I was wrong about myself for believing her, even for a moment. I was always beautiful, not because of my face or my figure, but because of my choices. Every day I chose love over hate, kindness over cruelty, grace over vengeance. That's the kind of pretty that doesn't fade with age or change with trends. It's the kind of pretty that saves lives, literally and figuratively. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have donated the kidney to save Kevin, knowing Margaret would never truly pay for her cruelty? Or would you have let justice take its course? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, someone in your life might be waiting for you to show them what real beauty looks like. Don't let them wait too long. Like, share, and subscribe if this story touched your heart. And remember, you are more beautiful than anyone who can't see your worth will ever understand.